Kakto joins us right now. The New York Republican sits on the House Homeland Security Committee, the ranking member there. Congressman, thank you for taking the time today. It could slow, maybe in light of these latest terror threats that are very real, despite taking out these two ISIS-K operatives. What do you make of that, and how things are looking for Tuesday, the deadline?
Well, I'm hearing that coming out of Afghanistan right now, that it's going to trickle to a halt even as early as today. So it's a certainty that not everyone's going to get out that wants to get out. And it's direct contravention what the president is saying. So that's going to happen. There's no question that Americans and people with SIV is going to be left behind. But, you know, some of the discussion you have been looking forward is we just had an article come out in Fox News right before I went on to the show, which confirmed what I've been hearing, is that their suspected terrorists or people on this terror watch list are being intercepted at the third country stations where we're bringing some of these Afghans before we bring them into the United States. So that's a concern, and we need to make sure the vetting process is extremely thorough. But on the home front, there's no question about it that everyone's antenna is up, because this world is much less safer and our country is much less safer because of what's going on in Afghanistan.
You know, we'll never know, and I know it's a mug's game at this point, Congressman, about would this have been very different under the prior administration and the earlier deadline. There's been a political back and forth on that. I don't know how productive that is at this stage. But I am wondering going forward what it says about whether we could deal with the Taliban. The last administration, you know, brokered this agreement with the Taliban that President Trump has said since would have never produced what we're seeing now. This administration, because it's the only game in town, has to deal with the Taliban and issues of control and what have you. But going forward, apparently the Taliban has been saying, we want you to maintain some diplomatic presence in the country. And so they're in this weird stage where we're working with each other, we don't trust each other, we don't necessarily like each other, but we kind of both need each other. Do you agree with that?
If that is in fact true, and I'm not sure it is, but if it is in fact true, it's a pathetic stance that we're in Afghanistan. We should have never gotten to this point. And the previous administration had certain measurables in their agreement, and it's clear that the Taliban hadn't met those measurables. And so therefore, that agreement probably would not have gone through on a pullout earlier this year. So for the president of this administration, President Biden, to say that he's following through on what happened in the previous administration, it just doesn't hold water. He could have reversed it in a second. And I just think back to World War II. We're still in Germany. We're still in Japan. And in the Korean War, we're still in Korea. And all three places have had enduring peace since. And having a small presence there, which I think this president was advised to keep, he adamantly refused and instead had a precipitous withdrawal. And now we have a mess on our hands. And me in Homeland Security, and being the head of Homeland Security for Republicans, has a tremendous task ahead of me to try and make sure we make the necessary oversight to keep this country safe, because there's no question, like I said, people like Ray Kelly, the commissioner of New York City Police and the head of CBP in the past, said as recently as yesterday that everyone's antenna is up because everyone's foreseeing a much higher terror threat because of what's happening in Afghanistan.
But under the prior administration, we still would have exited entirely. We'd have no troop presence, right? I mean,
I'm not sure that would happen because of the measurables there. That's the concern, and that's what Secretary Pompeo has been saying as well. So,
okay, I just understand that we did enter into an agreement with it, and I understand what you're saying, sir. But I do want to be clear on what happens now. If we are looking at, you know, not trusting the Taliban and keeping our distance, apparently not informing of this strike on ISIS-K, so there's a limit to how far we'll go talking to them, then it looks like there's no way we can maintain or would want to maintain relations with this new Afghan government after we leave. Would you advise that? Would you say the Taliban is so evil and untrustworthy, we're not going to deal with you, we're not going to talk to you?
Well, at this point, I think any information is helpful. If we can continue to have some sort of dialogue with them and not, although we don't trust them, I don't see how that's going to hurt us. We got to have a very strong filter. But the bottom line is we're relying on the words of people who are beheading people in the streets, and are going to go back to a much different way of life for women there, and who we fought to get out of there because they provided a breeding ground for terrorism. So it's not going to be helpful even if we are having a dialogue with them. And one thing's for sure, we're not going to have intel on the ground about the ISIS groups, ISIS maneuverings there, Al-Qaeda's maneuverings there, and Taliban's, all of which are probably going to grow in stature going forward, which portends very badly for the U.S. from a homeland security standpoint. Let's not forget, the Taliban was in control pre-9/11 and allowed these groups to metastasize and then launch attacks to the U.S. that were so deadly 20 years ago. And that's my biggest concern.
Do you think it was a mistake then? Do you think it was a mistake then to have entered into any sort of agreement with the Taliban at all?
I don't necessarily think negotiating with people like Taliban is to me is not the right move. I think projecting strength instead of weakness and then talking to them would have been okay. I think that's what the previous administration was trying to do. But I do think that they set measurables that weren't met. So to try and weave in that the previous administration got this ball rolling, it's just not accurate. Let's not forget, President Biden's one of his primary campaign promises again and again and again was we're getting out of Afghanistan come hell or high water. And he overruled his leaders' advice in that regard by all accounts. And now we have this mess, and we have a terrible number of soldiers that have been killed. And my heart goes out to their families as well for that.
Understood. We will never know a lot of what could have been. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. Fair and Balanced, I want to go to Representative Scott Peters, California Democrat.